immigration policies group. So go ahead and go on to the next slide. So for our cultural products, we decided to conduct products that were photography based. So we did photojournalism and historical memes. So the people who did photojournalism, they chose one person or two people to interview that were relevant to their like specific topics, and they used photos as a means of documentation and representation. While the other member, they decided to do a historical meme because they felt like it was a great method and tool to stop dialogue in a society where people are scrolling quickly through information and media until something catches their eyes. Go ahead and.
Okay, so the way we felt that pictures promote public history is, first of all, photojournalism is a good way of creating primary sources. And then, of course, memes can present of various academic disciplines like history in a way that piques more interest, and because they are often humorous or controversial, and then this then opens up a dialogue through the images. They're easily accessible to the public, which we all know. It's and it reaches a lot of people in a short amount of time. And we felt that the photos can convey a sense of emotions or ideas that sometimes is not easily expressed in words. Next slide, please.
Okay, so because all of our topics are dealing with like minority groups or education, which deals with the younger population, we were able to find this graph from pretty recently. It reflects the years 2010 and 2018 and shows how populations have. So if, you know, as education has a lot, as you can see, of ethnic minority representation, yet what kids are learning in schools is an Anglo-European perspective of history, which leaves out marginalized groups and keeps them underrepresented.
Okay, so for the first project, it was mine. So I did it on immigration policies. So I wanted to attack immigration policies because I think there's issues within the system that need to be addressed. And I kind of wanted to get feedback from immigrants who have gone through the process or who are currently going through the process to see what they think about the process. And so this graph is from the Department of Homeland Security. And so this is kind of like from 1907 to 2019, it's the people who have been naturalized, like the amount of people. And so I focused on the Mexican population, I guess. And so between 2017 and 2019, they ranged between 14 and 18% of the population that was naturalized. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then this graph is from Pew Research, and it specifically focuses more to show the Mexican population that was naturalized. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so the first two interviews I did were with Sochi Peters and Alicia Decker. So this would be my mom and my aunt. So they were both born in TJ, and they came into the United States on visas when they were 2 and 8. So before then, they had traveled into the United States on a daily basis for school. And so this is when they finally moved to the US. So my mom, she gained her citizenship through her parents at the age of 14 because that's when they decided to do the process. But my aunt Alicia, she had to get it on her own at 20 years old. So both of the women, they were told by their parents that they were getting citizenship. They weren't like, it wasn't really like, oh, do you want to get your citizenship? Or like, can I get my citizenship? It was, they were told this what was happening, and they were handed paperwork that was already filled out. And so my grandparents were really proud to be Mexican, but they were even prouder to say that they were American citizens because they were really true believers in the American dream. And so looking back at it, both of the women realized how much privilege they had through the whole process, because they really didn't have to do anything. They just had to go turn in paperwork. But both of them think that the process should be cheaper and shouldn't take as long, because they know that now the process is like way longer than when in the 80s when they did the process. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next interview was with Veronica Flores. So she came into the United States on the tourist visa in July of 1998. And so she ended up staying past her visa, making her like an illegal immigrant. And so she did this because she believed that her children could have a better life in America. And so she says that her kid, that she thinks it's worth it because she does see the effect that it had on her kids and how much better they were able to live here. However, the whole process has really taken a toll on her because she hasn't been able to go home in over 20 plus years. So she's barely starting to try to do the citizenship process because she was waiting for her son to come of age. So the age is 21, so he could be her sponsor. However, they don't have the money to do it because even just like the visa itself, you have to pay like over $1,000 to file an application. And then for the actual citizenship application, it's like $720. So they don't have the money, so she has to wait even longer to do that process. And she also agreed that she thinks that it should be less expensive and that it should take a short amount of time to do the process. Next slide.
Okay, so this is my dad. He is a former teacher, and I chose to use this as my product because I was trying to get a kind of candid photo of him, and I thought that this showed, I guess, kind of that emotion of frustration while he was talking about the education system. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, he was a teacher for more than 10 plus years. It was something he kind of always wanted to do, but he ended up leaving teaching because I guess he was disheartened with the way that the administration was functioning, and he didn't feel that there was the necessary support for teachers. He said that he felt like people were constantly expecting more and more of them in terms of like results with their students while they were receiving less support, less funding, and not enough, I guess, support in terms of like the parents too sometimes. Next slide, please. And so his opinion on standardized tests is that they might be effective in measuring a student's comprehension of those established standards, but the problem is that those standards aren't taking into account that these kids come from different backgrounds. So it's measuring them on this level, which doesn't actually show their own abilities, because of course, coming from different backgrounds, people have different forms of language that they use. And not only that, but it like doesn't express whether or not a student will be like making a lot of progress if, for example, they start below grade level and then they make a lot of progress throughout the year, but if they don't reach that standard, it doesn't show how much work they put in. And another problem was that a lot of the kids that he taught came from kind of more lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and that meant that the parents had a lot of time that they spent working and they weren't always able to give them that support at home. And of course, that reflected on the tests as well. Next slide, please. So then the problem with this is that those scores, no matter what work, of course, the teacher puts into helping their students, a lot of the students he said he worked with were the kids of immigrants, if not immigrants themselves. And so there was kind of like that language thing they had to overcome when they were first coming over. He was a biology teacher, and that was something that they had to be able to work with. And they might have made a lot of progress, but then when those scores don't come out and satisfy the level that, of course, the state is expecting of them, it reflects negatively on the teachers. And so with so many different kids with like a huge scale of needs, it's really hard to gear their lessons towards everyone or do something that is satisfactory for everyone. I use this quote from the Association for Supervision of Curriculum Development that says the school's standardized test scores, if they are low, they see the school staff as ineffective. In either case, because educational quality is being measured by the wrong yardstick, those evaluations are apt to be an error. So it's like it's maybe not measuring it depending on the progress that kid is making themselves. Next slide, please.
Okay, so this my topic was about for ethnic studies. It's an interdisciplinary study of race, ethnicity, and also sexuality and gender through perspectives of marginalized groups. This data included here is from LAUSD 2019-2020. Their data of the number of students enrolled and by what ethnicity or that they identify with. And so all the blue-ish area is Hispanic students. And that makes up over almost 75% of the students in the LUSD system. If you include the other minorities that are represented here, they make up just over 90% of all LUSD students. The other map here that I included shows states that have either some kind of, states that have either addressed ethnic studies in some way or they haven't. So the green states are states that do have some kind of law or policy in place that promotes ethnic studies and maybe makes it a requirement or just available as courses to be taken. The colors in orange are states that have introduced legislation in the past, but it wasn't passed at that time. And the states in red, which I calculated to be 28 states, so over half of the states in the US, have not had any kind of ethnic studies legislation or effort as of yet. But as the trends are changing, that can also change, hopefully soon as well. The first meme that I did, I put it under like organization and action. So I put, an image, as you can see, it's at the very bottom one is what was going on in Tucson, Tucson School District, not LUSD. And so with these images, we just see how people are organizing and, actively going out to try to promote the cause of ethnic studies and get legislation passed. And the people that are doing this are a variety of people that include students, teachers, and activists. The other meme that I put was under the theme of representation. So the image, shows people from different ethnic backgrounds. And I put we need just one more month because, a lot of these ethnic groups have like African American history is February, gay pride is June, but 1 month out of the whole school year that focuses on maybe authors or more of like historical figures from these groups isn't enough. We need more year-round, semester-long, where we're able to go deeper into the histories of these peoples. I got a friend to respond to this one, and her response was just yes. So. The other theme that I went with was, meme that I went with was addressing like technology and politics. So I just want to say like this is, it's not getting banned for those of you who do like TikTok, but I just said like this would be a reason maybe why the US banned it, hypothetically, because TikTok as a platform, there's a lot of content creators out there who create for like Latinx, Black, American Indian, LGBTQ, Asian American. So there's a lot of content creators on there who are willing and ready to offer education and history from their perspectives, as well as being members of these groups. So the last one that I did was kind of on policy. I was looking up the AB 331, which I didn't know had also been vetoed by Newsom, just like AB 101 was vetoed by Jerry Brown back in 2015. So this is just showing that, there is a want and desire for an ethnic studies curriculum in the classrooms, but at a government level, for K through 12 at least, and to make it a high school graduation requirement, it's just not happening as of yet. For this, I put a poll on my Instagram and I asked people how willing they would be for ethnic studies curriculum as well as a requirement, and I got 100% that said yes, but there was like 15 people. I don't have that many followers, but it was something. So I think out of all of our topics, the thing that kind of brings us all together is just like policy, whether it's immigration policy, whether it's for standardized testing, or whether it's for the curriculum. The policy needs to be changed. It needs to better represent California as the most ethnically diverse state in the country. Thank you.
Is that the conclusion of this presentation?
That's the conclusion.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's give applause, snaps, all that virtual emoji stuff. Wonderful work. All right, thank you so much, group Education Policy and Laws. That was extremely informative. I mean, just amazing, amazing research. And it's wonderful, as you can see, that you're trying to connect to new audiences, right? How do you get folks engaged in this information, right? It very much affects folks. All right, let's move on to our next group, health, social media, and influence. Who's gonna be sharing their screen for this piece?
Technical issues. See, give me a moment. Let me go back to the technical. Sorry, I'm on the slide. Technical issues. Okay. Is our group ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, everyone ready, right? So, um, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead and.
All right, so my part of the presentation was focusing on mental health awareness. And next slide, please.
Okay.
And when I was doing this project initially, I kind of had these goals in mind that I wanted to accomplish. So some of them being bring awareness to mental health, to inform people on stats and data of people with some sort of mental health disease that sorry, my screen is acting that do not have the proper help support that they need. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back, please? I'm sorry about that. And the last two is try to give a voice to those that struggle with mental health, and to hopefully share and like help you guys find a way that you guys could bring awareness to mental health as well. Next slide. So initially, I kind of wanted to search up data for adults and I guess the youth. That's what you'll call it. And initially, what I found is that I'm sorry, Nancy, can you go back? Sorry about that. So for adults, I found that 19.1% of U.S. adults experience some sort of mental health, some sort of mental health illness. 4.6 of U.S. adults experience some sort of serious mental health illness, and 3.7 of U.S. adults experience a co-occurring substance use disorder and mental illness. Next slide. As for youth, what I found was that 60% of youth with major depression did not receive any mental health whatsoever, mental health treatment whatsoever. I also found that youth mental health is worsening, and 9.7 of youth in the US have severe major depression compared to 9.2% in last year's database, which was this year's being 2020 and last year's 2019. Even before COVID-19, the prevalence of mental health among adults was increasing. So it increased 1.5 million people over last year's database. And another thing that I found interesting when I was doing my research is I found that the mental illnesses can have like a ripple effect. So people, for example, people with depression have a 40% higher risk of developing cardiovascular and metabolic disease. People with serious mental illnesses are nearly twice as likely to develop like these conditions. 19.3% of US adults with mental illnesses also experience a substance use disorder. So that could be anything from like tobacco, like other forms of drugs, alcohol, any sort of like substance abuse. The rate of unemployment is higher amongst US adults who have mental illnesses compared to those that do not. And high school students with significant symptoms of depression are more than twice as likely to drop out compared to their peers. And I kind of found like this picture in this website, and it's kind of like gives reasons why it's okay to talk about suicide and like I guess other forms of mental diseases. So it gives examples like suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34 in the US, and suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the US. So I'm not gonna go through all of them. You guys could kind of like get an idea. So next slide, please. And this is my cultural product right here. I did this video with my nephew who suffers from a mental health illness himself. It's called depersonalization disorder. And I kind of wanted to get like his message or like his, I guess, how would I say it? Like I guess what he's experienced, like his life, like with living with this disease. So if you could go ahead and play it, Nancy, thank you.
It won't play, that's the thing. So can you share it so I can play?
Oh, it's not playing?
Yeah, it won't play.
Okay. I'm sorry about that, Professor. Let me get it. Oh, wait, I got to share first. I'm sorry about that.
Stop screen so he can share.
Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, let me see. All right, there you go. All right. So first, what's your name?
Luis Baez.
All right. And what's your disorder?
Depersonalization disorder.
Depersonalization disorder?
Yeah.
All right. So how long have you had this disorder?
I was diagnosed about 8 months ago.
8 months ago. And do you feel like people look at you different?
Yeah, I actually do feel like people look at me different just because they can't really seem to understand the situations that I go through. And it's just kind of always, it's always just put like I always feel like I get dirty eyes just because people kind of take me as a liar or just like I don't know, maybe I'm just putting up an act, but it's just, it hurts a lot to be seen like that.
So it's like they can't wrap their head around like what you have pretty much.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this disorder has affected your relationship with like friends or your family?
I don't really feel like it affected it deeply. I just kind of feel like it was kind of hard for them to understand. But I say, nah, it hasn't.
Do you feel like you get the support that you need, like from your parents, schools, or like other students, counselors, stuff like that?
Well, for me personally, I feel like I have gotten the support that I needed just because I have really supportive parents. And my mom was actually able to get in contact with the school, and she was able to get in contact with a therapist, and she was able to help me. So yeah, I do feel like I get the support.
And so, how many times like do you meet like with the therapist?
Usually, I meet with her every Thursday, every week, and that's when I usually get to talk to her about any situations and about how I feel.
So, do you feel like ever since you started talking to this therapist, like it's helped you, or?
Yeah, I do feel like it's helped me a lot just because I kind of have somebody that kind of doesn't judge, just because she's able to help me, and she's able to try to understand what I'm going through, even though it's something that a lot of therapists don't usually get, because apparently my disorder was rare, but she was able to actually understand, and she was able to help me through a lot of things, and I was able to feel like I actually got a person that wanted to talk to me.
All right, that's cool. All right, we're done. All right, and that was my cultural project. And let me stop sharing. Is the screen back? Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah. All right, so that was my part, Professor, and passing on to the next person.
Okay, so this is my part. So for my cultural project, I really wanted to continue with what we did on the midterm and make a series of memes. But I kind of wanted to make them a little bit more funny, and I'll just kind of go through each of them and explain them. But I really tried to focus on social disconnection as well as just the addiction that we feel that people can get from social media. And so the first one, I really wanted to focus on the negative self-esteem issues that can come with social media. And the reason why I chose Kim Kardashian is because I actually work in the fashion and entertainment industry, and all my friends, we always kind of make fun of the funny outfits that she always has on and just the style that she has. Um, anyways, also, the other reason why I put her in this image is because she has had so much plastic surgery and has had such a huge impact on the fashion industry that the amount of people getting plastic surgery has gone up exponentially since the rise of social media. And it's led to people spending huge amounts of money, money that they do not have in order to get plastic surgery, and has led to mainly young women having self-esteem issues. And that was one of the other reasons why I depicted put an image of young women at the top. And men also experience problems with this as well, but it's not on such of a large scale. And so my next one kind of focuses a lot more on social disconnection. And the images at the bottom are actually from Lord of the Rings. I don't know if there's any Lord of the Rings fans, but I love Lord of the Rings. So for the top image, the reason why I put a bunch of messages coming through is that there's been a lot of studies that show that anybody who has more than 500 followers on any type of social media platform tend to have a lot more negative effects with self-esteem and social disconnection than other people do. And to define social disconnection, just for anybody who's not extremely sure what it is, it's when people just have a harder time understanding social cues and sharing experiences and inferring other people's thoughts. And that can come from a direct correlation of just spending too much time on social media. And the reason why I made this meme is because I'm pretty sure all of us, this happened to me a lot, where you're having a conversation with someone and they whip out their phone to check their notifications. And it's not necessarily something that like really bothers me a whole lot, but it happens a lot when I go to family gatherings and things like that. And it's always been something that's kind of annoyed me personally. And then the next one is kind of a more personal one. It's not, I didn't put an image of someone using social media. I put an image of someone playing World of Warcraft, which is a game that I really like. And the reason why I made the connection with the game to social media is there's a lot of aspects that are similar with the game and social media. As in, you can spend all your time on this game and talk in a chat with people, but never actually interact with them. And I actually had a problem with playing the game like crazy. I played all day, and I thought I had depression and anxiety, and I had a lot of problems with interacting with people because of how much time I was spending in the game and not interacting with other people. And it got to the point where I started going to see a therapist, and they told me to try to find just a group of people who have my same interests to just get off of playing a game and get out of the house. And I fell into LARPing. And if you don't know what that is, LARP stands for live action role play. And it looks exactly like what it is in the image of just a bunch of nerds running around in armor and whacking each other with foam weapons. And so I got into that, and I got into a group where we make outfits of our avatars, and then go into battle and fight each other and stuff. And it was something that was really fun for me, and something that really changed my life and helped me get away from playing so many games and get away from social media. And one thing, you can change slides, that's fine.
Sorry, this group
Thank
has
you.
4 minutes left for its entire presentation.
Okay, I'll finish with that then. Thank you.
Who's next to speak for the group? There's about 4 minutes left.
Sorry, I mute my I mute. So when it comes to the topic of mental health around the Asian American communities, we tend to see it as a shame, as something that we don't want to share, and this is why I want to bring it as an importance for us to talk about the topic of mental health, because if without talking about it with our family, we tend to withhold this pressure so much that we won't know, like, for example, because of media, everything, it will affect us. So it's always good to like share about it. So even if an Asian Chinese American myself, I can feel that when I get pressure, I tend to not share with my family. I tend to withhold everything. So it's like a mental health myself. So I would really think that it's important to share about the topic of mental health. So that's why I drew this picture of myself with the dark side and the clear side and the dark side of how mental health has affected me. The more, that's why I need to like relax and go out more instead of staying indoors social media, which will affect my health. Next is
Right, that's for me. So I also did the social media influence on teenagers. The main connection is pretty much how most social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, I'm pretty sure most of us have it, but they all follow some sort of addictive formula that pretty much entangles a lot of people to pretty much be more addicted to it, because it when you get a like or a comment, it releases dopamine, and dopamine is a chemical that makes you feel good, and it kind of also creates a distant, like your reliance on social media, it distances you from other people, because it's the only thing that makes you happy when you become so overconfident in it and overused. And you could go on to the next slide. I think we got like 1 minute. And then for most of the issues, I do contributed to the like system that is implemented into most of it. It does create a desire among many to attempt to recreate images they've seen. It doesn't matter how dangerous or how dumb or how weird it looks, as long as they're able to get likes among pretty much their peers or anybody within the social media platform, it'll give them that kind of confidence. But it also has adverse effects, because that's where they're only getting their confidence from, not from any real life interactions. And that leads them to lacking in social interaction skills, which can make them feel alone and isolated. You could go on to the next page. And so I did want to provide some possible solutions, since social media addiction has been proven to affect a lot of people. There's actually a lot of programs that are available to people that provide step-by-step solutions to overcoming this addiction to social media. And yeah, providing awareness to parents also, I think would be beneficial, because most kids who are addicted live with their parents. Next one. So I did put 2 memes. I have the other one, but I think we're short on time. But for the first one, is just a father trying to interact with his son, asking him if, are you getting likes, son? And of course, the son, it's kind of just emotionless and void, because it's probably too late, and the social media, addiction has kind of developed a lot of issues within him. And the last one is just pretty much self-explanatory. It's kind of how a lot of people are willing to put their mental health in disarray just to acquire some Instagram likes or Facebook likes or any comment kind of. And that's for my part. Thank you.
Okay, so mine was healthcare in the United States. The United States is the only profit-motivated healthcare system in the world, I believe. We have a more profit-driven perspective concerning our healthcare. Americans spent 3.2 trillion on healthcare in 2015 alone, which was roughly 17% of the GDP. And that's going to go up to roughly 20% of our GDP in 5 years. So it's getting serious. Next slide, please. And Here's a few more statistics about how the financial barriers are always block, access to healthcare, private insurance. People who aren't as well off, so to speak, are not all of them, but they're definitely the ones that get the short end of the stick. And next slide, please. And these are just some memes that I did. I really want to point out that I wanted to do something like from a more cynical perspective with some cruel irony, because I go into more detail in my essay, but this is definitely a way that many people view our system with cynicism instead of trust, so to speak, due to the conditions that our country is in. So yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Uriel and the rest of the group members. Let's go ahead and move to our next group. Everybody, let's give some snaps, some applause, all that good stuff, some emoji, applause, all that good stuff. And I believe we're now moving on to our, yes, we're moving on to our vulnerable populations group. Just a friendly reminder to keep it under 15 minutes, please, right? The entire presentation. So we're doing vulnerable populations with Rick, Karen, Jonathan, Megan, and James.
You can also see my screen, right? Let me see. I gotta move this. Okay. You can all still see it? Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll be starting off the presentation for the vulnerable populations group. So at first, we just wanted to define what a vulnerable population is considered. So it's considered people who lack access to healthcare and those that are more likely to suffer from diseases or poor health conditions and even death. So people that would be considered in this population would be those that are economically disadvantaged, racial and ethnic minorities, the uninsured, low economic children, the elderly, the homeless, and those that suffer from mental chronic illnesses, as well as those with physical disabilities. And that'll be all for that.
Okay, so as far as vulnerable populations go, this is one category that I picked that I felt applied to what it is that we were studying. As far as this is concerned, Dakota Access Pipeline, and we have the Sioux tribe, who were the central group that were a part of this whole debacle, and the Sioux tribe of natives, alongside the federal government, agreed on the Laramie Treaty of 1851, where land was designated in the to the tribe, and was later transgressed in the pipeline construction. That's not to say that it wasn't transgressed over the years. Immediately after the 1851 treaty was made, there was a tribe specifically that was in the Great Lakes region, and as colonizers came, that tribe moved over to the Great Plains westward into the North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming region, where they settled, and then that is where the federal government agreed that this is your land, and that's where the treaty came from. And then after that, there was the whole California gold rush, and there was again people moving throughout that region who were not a part of the group and a part of the tribe, which caused conflict. And so that portion of land was kind of disrespected from the get-go, up to now, where we have this pipeline issue. And that was one of the main concerns for this tribe. So we have thousands of protesters attempting to block the pipeline, which decimated the sacred burial grounds and jeopardized the water supply, because they use that Missouri River, where they basically, that's where they get their fresh water. And they were concerned that someday it would break and their fresh water would be at a jeopardized. So despite protests, the pipeline was completed in 2017 and it had since leaked several hundreds of thousands of gallons. And this was in the multiple times as far as the Keystone XL pipeline is concerned, right there along the border of Canada, just about an hour away of Canada. There's a lot of vegetation. Again, with several hundreds of thousands that was leaked out into that area. Thankfully, the Missouri River hasn't been compromised yet, but that is to be seen. And the pipeline continues to run crude oil down through Illinois, once again up through that near Canadian border, down to Texas and Illinois. And this has started in 2016, the spring of 2016, soon after these protesters had came. And this lasted around like 10 or 11 months. And by the end of it, it was spring 2017 when it was all said and done. And the tribe had made several contacts before this was even underway, before the construction was underway, with the Transfer Energy Company and with several departments of the government expressing their concerns. However, they were not heard. And if we can go to the next.
7 minutes left for the entire presentation.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so here we have Iron Eyes Cody. The environment still matters and corruption remains status quo. And then we have the actual protest where I put a quote by Ben Franklin, and that will do for my portion.
So my section for vulnerable populations is transgender rights. Originally, I was going to go off of like somewhat more historical, like chronological order, but I ended up going a different route in my essay. But what kind of starts off like trans visibility is like the Stonewall Inn riots in June 28th of 1969. And after those riots, specifically in New York, there began like a really aggressive, violent, and weird NYPD campaign against criminalizing transgender women. And there were laws in place at the time, I cannot remember them at the top of my head, but against like cross-dressing in public, and they also used loitering laws in place to arrest transgender women of color. And they also, because sex work is criminalized, they also later in the 80s and 90s considered people that had condoms on them to be sex workers, that further criminalized and stigmatized transgender women and other transgender people. One of the major issues that was happening in the late 20th and early 21st century was employment discrimination. And then this year there was a Supreme Court ruling, I didn't put the case, but it extended the 1964 Civil Rights Act to be able to ensure you cannot be discriminated against for a job on your sexual orientation, your gender identity, and etc. But that ruling does not extend for healthcare and other things like that you can still be discriminated against on. My cultural product, I did a watercolor painting because for me, it's very therapeutic to paint and kind of just came to me. So I did one of the original pride flags on the left. One of the questions I got from my reactions that I got to the cultural product was why there was black and brown on this pride flag. Originally black and brown was a part of the flag to recognize black and brown bodies that have gone through violence and represent them in their entirety on the flag, but later that changed. On the right side, I did the transgender flag. And I can't tell if you can see it too well, but on the right side corner, I put the number 37 and 35. The number 35 represents the average lifespan of a transgender woman in the US. And honestly, I think it might get lower because of the number next to it. This year so far, 37 transgender or non-gender conforming people have been killed so far in 2020. That statistic I got from CNN, from a CNN article, was updated on November 21st. So we'll see if it'll get higher or if it'll just stay at that number. But the red stripe at the bottom was just to show the violence and suffering that a lot of these people go through in the community. Let's see, sorry, can't see my.
3 minutes left.
Okay, I'll try to make this quick. So my topic on the vulnerable group is the homeless population, specifically within LA County and downtown LA. As you can see here, the population of homeless people are approximately 66,436, and more will be rising considering with this pandemic definitely is going to skyrocket with rents on the way and just no protections for vulnerable groups. It is the second largest city with the most homeless population, New York being first. And the biggest thing that I've seen is, well, what's the issue? Like, why can't we find them homes? Is it lack of programs, or is it because of them? There's a lot of variables behind it, but the biggest one is definitely within the official cities. There's ordinance codes. Police also is another factor. The city itself, with its outdated laws that will prevent or anchor from any progression whatsoever, and improvements, excuse me. So the picture I showed there is what I saw in downtown LA. Now, the reason I didn't put any pictures of homeless people or any alleyways specifically is because we have this already notion of what a homeless person would look like, and we immediately stereotype with them with like a tent, ragged clothing, and in the curbside street with trash all around them. And so I think that with this picture, it represents a little more than just, the stereotypical, but it's more like just their humanity being slowly drifting away. At least that's what I see in this photo, because I myself was homeless before. So, and I could tell stories, and it would be only chipping the iceberg of what this homeless vulnerable population is. Like, I roamed in the streets, like in Alameda Street, meeting people variouses, and then for me personally, I kept a journal entry log and such, and it was a way for me personally to cope amongst the whole group of people that they themselves have either been abandoned or been forced out into it, and or just simply used to it now because they've been homeless for much longer than I have possibly been. They have decades over my years. So by telling stories, it would pertain to public history, because with paper trails like my journal entries or other people's stories, it would show the population, the homeless population, not as a quantitative statistic number, but as qualitative. So that way there would be a better understanding as to how the homeless population is enduring this. And the reason I say the rivers of Los Angeles, because the roads themselves, at least I saw them as rivers. So people just flow back and forth, and much like how anyone, like you would typically go on a boat ride, you would see trees, stationary stuff, or random things here and there. That's how I would personally see them, like that. So from both ends, well, in a car and then outside of a car, seeing people passing by, and it's just how invisible one becomes pretty quick as soon as they see you with a specific character traits. And so my personal experience is just, like I said, only a minuscule thing, and the only way to make those necessary changes is within the city, the office, the politics, and such. But even then, that's like a very long and extraneous battle that requires constant pressure from activists to continuously pressure people, like people in office, to make these changes, talk about these things. And so like Black Lives Matters, for example, or there's the Chicano movement, there's the I can't remember a few off the top of my head, but those movements, those activists, CBE, Mecha, and all those groups are just what we need in order to get the city to actually listen to the homeless population. Because some of the people there, even myself, fell into those groups where you know what, I'm just getting by. And that's when you realize homeless population is vulnerable, because they just want to get by with either food or some other sustenance. And
that is time. Is there?
So I will end it right there.
It's okay. Thank you. Is there another member? Because I have that on the list.
Yeah, it was me and I think it was James, right?
Okay, I'll give you folks 2 minutes more time, right? And I'm sorry, this is what happens when we, get together in groups. We need to time it, and it looks like you folks needed like 3 minutes apiece, and we went like 10 minutes apiece. So go ahead. We'll give you.
I'll try to do it quick. Okay, so for me, I did the undocumented workers. So I mainly focused in California. So in California alone, there's 2,625,000 in immigrant population in California. 78% from that comes from Latin America. And of that population, 548,000 are employed. And I was surprised to see that 1 in 10 Californian workers is an undocumented immigrant. And in order to lease, majority of them work in the service, then construction, and then we have the production and maintenance sectors. Okay, you can go to the next one. Okay. So why are they vulnerable? So the 2 main reasons is why they're vulnerable is because they're exploitable for cheap and free labor due to their citizenship and the need for them to have a job. So since they don't have a social security, most of the time they have to get paid with cash. And when this happens, their bosses could either threaten them with getting deported so to not pay them, or the boss just takes forever to pay them. And then also because they're here, they're leaving their home country for a better life in the US. Once they get here, they're gonna realize that it's not as easy to get a job. So they're gonna take whatever comes at them, no matter if it's hard, it's a hardworking job and it's long hours and it pays a little bit. And most recently with the pandemic, since they don't have social security benefits, they suffered a lot since they either had to, since they can't get unemployment or disability, they either had to work and risk contracting the virus, or suffer economic hardships. And the only help that they got was from small organizations or themselves. Okay, that's it.
Hi, I'm James, and for my cultural project, I drew a picture. It depicts a community of color surrounded on all sides by toxic industries, and those toxic industries are slowly leaching into the community. And on the right-hand side, I drew some symbols that describe some of the causes, some of the effects of these pollutions. So more often than not, these communities of colors will have higher rates of asthma, heart disease, lung cancer, and even death. And Black and Latinos are almost twice as likely, 2 times more likely to live in areas with unhealthy toxic particles in the air. And they're also more likely to live near freeways, recycling plants, landfills, and particulate matter of less than 2.5 is actually really bad. That's what causes things such as asthma and lung disease. Okay, that's it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Let's give snaps and applause and all that good stuff for this. And we're going to get to our final group, right? Without further ado, it's our social economic issues group. Go ahead and start setting up. Karen, if we have a chance, we'll definitely talk about your cultural product, right? I want to make sure that you put that in, okay? And then who's sharing? Dan, are we sharing our screen for this piece?
We asked Dan to do it, so he had the most reliable internet.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, ready? Good evening. My name is Javier. We are the Social and Economic Issues Group and kind of focus on COVID 2019. Next page, please. Dan, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Our presentation topics are covered. Mine is COVID-19, elder fraud. Dan is doing poverty and unemployment. Matthew's doing voter fraud and voter suppression. And Alexis is also doing COVID, the economy, and the people. Next one, please. So COVID-19 pandemic. As of December 6, 2020, there have been more than 1.3 million cases of COVID in California and 14.4 million cases in the United States alone since January 21st of 2020. This pandemic has impacted how we go about our lives, welfare, and how we do our jobs. Our economic and social well-being has been tethering on the next piece of nightly news or even the next presidential tweet. We have been in this pandemic for close to 1 year now, and we have gone through so much, from airport closures, border closures, stock market crashes, mass unemployment, crazy essential market runs, massive gatherings like candidate speeches, presidential election voter fraud, and a country shutdown. Many have realized the fragility of human life, and even though the world is coming together to fight the virus, we're still at a vulnerable phase. And during this phase, there are some who have decided to take advantage of the situation. Next, please. Fraud during the pandemic. At our most vulnerable time, there have been many warning and alerts for victims of fraud during the pandemic, and they range from check fraud, job scams, stimulus checks, and phishing, which is email and text. Many people are impacted by these scams every day, especially the elderly that are at home most of the time, are scared or can't go out, and are relying on family or caregivers, thus having low awareness to these scammers. For this awareness, I created fraud awareness memes to make others aware of what types of fraud is out there right now. Before we go to the next page, I also want to include that, unfortunately, these elders aren't aware of these new types of fraud because they already have to deal with fake loan calls, IRS scam calls, shutting off water and electricity scams, and people calling to pretending to be family members in need of money. Next page, please. I posted these both about a week ago on my Instagram page. As you can see, I just basically wrote what kind of fraud it is and what to do after that. Robocalls, hang up, don't press any buttons, because that's actually telling them that there's someone active on the other line. Phishing is when you get a text or email. It's basically either viruses or just don't click on anything, just delete it. And sometimes even applying for jobs online, there's people that are kind of vulnerable right now, and they looking for jobs because a lot of people got fired or furloughed, and they don't know that there's a lot of scams out there just for jobs as well. And one of them, the basic one I saw, was sending you a check to buy office supplies, etc., and afterwards to send them back the remainder using either Western Union, MoneyGram, wire transfer, or prepaid cards. So that's one of the major scam right now. Next page. Oh, the buttons actually on the bottom, the numbers 36 and 101, where how many views I got through image flip is where I created them and let them get posted. And I think, can you go to the next page, please?
I just want to make sure we're mindful of time. We've got 12 minutes left for the entire presentation.
Yeah, this is my last one. So I posted this one literally like 2 days ago. Just it says all types of frauds and scams, and it didn't get posted because they thought I was spamming and advertising too much. So this one never got posted. So I had like 3 views, I think. And I did get on the previous Instagram thing, I did have someone post on it. This is a comment I had that they put on my page. I like to threaten their lives and call them every name in the book till they hang up. Last time I told them that the guy named Tom, that I hope China invades his country and turns his neighborhood into a crater. I just don't have the time or patience anymore to string them along. The person's name and the website. And yeah, we've been getting a lot of robocalls during this pandemic, and just want to tell everyone to be careful. And that's it for mine.
Okay, mine's next. I covered poverty, labor, and employment during COVID-19. There's a lot of text right there, but the main takeaways is that marginalized groups have been bearing the brunt of COVID-19 and like the negative economic effects. Minority and marginalized groups are bearing a lot of it, mainly because workers like Black and brown workers are typically frontline workers, so they're more exposed to like the public and such. So they're more likely to get sick. On top of that, labor rights have been curbed when the whole issue over the summer with reopening the economy. A lot of businesses have been cutting corners and basically not maintaining safe workplaces for workers. And a lot of people have been getting sick as a result of that. And as well, let's see. Yeah, so there's been also state and federal attempts at curbing workers' rights and like privileges. One of them being the Department of Labor re-examining what it means to be like an employee versus a contractor. And if you guys are not familiar with that, we saw that with Proposition 22 here in California. And so on the right, I actually shared that later because it's a part of the cultural product. So actually, I will save that for later. Yeah, so businesses, both big and small, have been lax in maintaining safe work environments. Some of the more notable examples that you've probably seen recently is the Tyson farm food workers. On top of that, you might have also heard about the California farm workers, both for the pandemic and the wildfires that were happening during like September, October. On top of that, workers have also had to face the fact that a lot of businesses are closing and shutting down. A lot of workers are losing jobs, and we have higher unemployment numbers than like what we've seen in the Great Recession. Let's see. Yeah, so and as a result of that, there's a lot of more households in poverty, and there's a lot of families actually getting evicted currently, or are in the process of being evicted in the middle of a pandemic. And so my cultural products kind of revolve around the employee contractor issue. And so I asked people on my social media how much they know about like labor law essentially regarding that and how they voted on Proposition 22. And as you can see on the larger photo, you can get paid for the same amount, like as an employee and as a contractor. But when you go through the all the accounting details, you can lose up to, in this example, both workers are earning like 24K. An independent contractor has to pay almost $7,000 essentially out of pocket. That would be covered if the worker was an employee. And so that's kind of the reality that like app-based drivers kind of have to face at the moment. And sadly, at the national level, a lot more workers have to kind of like face that legal battle. And yeah, that's pretty much it for mine.
All right, hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, so I want a quick disclaimer before I move on. I'm going to be talking on voter fraud and voter suppression. However, I will not be going into the allegations that have been seen from the 2020 general election. The investigations still continue. There has been no final outcome. Okay, so voter fraud and suppression. First, I want to define the difference between the two of them because both are very closely related. Voter fraud is basically the interfering with the election by tampering with votes to improve the chances of victory for the preferred candidate. It can also involve bribing certain voters and many other tactics. Voter suppression, however, is a strategy to discourage or prevent a specific part of the population from voting and participating in an election. Now, voter suppression and voter fraud have occurred throughout American history, even predating America itself during the colonial times. However, it was particularly rampant during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, before being banned somewhere between the mid-20th century. Voter suppression has historically targeted minority and low-income voters. This was seen during the Jim Crow era in the South, where African Americans were being suppressed from voting. Um, Politicians and lawmakers enacted, what was it, poll tax, where people had to pay a tax in order to vote, and literacy tests. Voter fraud took form when politicians bribed voters. Voters were being forced to vote multiple times, even after being kidnapped and drugged. Voters purposely voted for more than one party. These people were called floaters. And repeaters were voters who purposely voted twice in the same election. Now, since the 2000 election, major efforts to secure the election have taken place. Many Republican-controlled states have enacted voter ID laws, believing that this would secure the integrity of the election and secure it from voter fraud. However, many voter rights advocates argue that voter ID laws actually suppress voters because many minorities don't have the same opportunities to have access to get a voter ID.
Sorry, 4 minutes left for the entire presentation.
Yes, okay, real quick. The COVID pandemic has heightened these fears. So because of this, universal mail-in voting and early voting was set in place. And this probably helped the general election as we've seen so far, with this being one of the highest turnout elections in modern American history, with Joe Biden reaching more votes than any other candidate in history and Donald Trump receiving more votes than any Republican candidate in American history. All right, if we can continue. Okay, so this is my cultural project. I made a series of memes. The first one focuses more on the history of voter fraud and connecting it to the modern era. The first one shows how George Washington, he is known as a brave and moral leader who gave up power for the good of the public. However, as early as 1758, he was known in participating in the bribing of voters with alcohol. Now, even though bribing voters with food and alcohol have been banned, politicians continue to influence voters by using food to this day. The second meme focuses on voter suppression, comparing allegations of voter suppression today to voter suppression in the past, asking the question if there is a difference. The third meme talks about how the partisanship between the two major parties have led to a distrust in the election system, and the refusal to find any bipartisan solution further causes mistrust in Americans. Thank you.
3 minutes left.
Okay, so my part of the presentation was focused on COVID, the economy, and really like the effects on the population. So there's a lot of text on the screen, but really what it comes down to is talking about how the government has responded to the pandemic, shutting down basically the economy for the last 9 months. Talking about how the American people have received one stimulus check, and only of those people that received the check, only 20 million of those have been on unemployment. Those are the most recent numbers, meaning they've been getting $600 checks a week. But on the other hand, in the spending bills that they passed, over 60% of the $4 trillion were given over to big businesses, many of whom did not even have a need for the money. They were not impacted by COVID, and they were given money essentially for free. They were given loans that were forgivable loans, meaning they don't have to pay the money back. And the Paycheck Protection Program that was set up to help workers has no real oversight, meaning that the companies that receive that money don't have to actually pay their workers with that money. So essentially, companies like like I have on screen, AT&T, Wells Fargo, big companies can take out loans for billions of dollars. They can borrow that money at extremely low rates, and they don't have to pay it back, while simultaneously laying off thousands and thousands of their employees. Really, it's just talking about how the government has taken the side of the big corporations and basically abandoned the American people, working class people, mainly Black and brown people, as those are the communities that have been suffering the most from COVID. They've had the most COVID cases. They have the most COVID cases because in many of those, they are required to go out every day and keep working. Many people have worked the entire pandemic. They haven't stopped working. essential workers, and in many cases, like in Latino communities, you have immigrants who they're not legally citizens here, so they have no right. They didn't get a stimulus check. They have no right to unemployment benefits. They have no choice but to go out and work every single day.
1 minute.
Can you go to the next slide, please? And here it is, basically talking about how America has just yesterday surpassed 15 million COVID cases. That's about 5% of the American population. How Black and Latino Americans have faced the brunt of COVID head on. They're the communities that have suffered the most, and they're the ones that have received the least amount of financial help from the government. Even the bill that they're trying to pass next week or in the coming weeks stated that there will be no more stimulus checks. It's only going to be another boost to unemployment and basically another bailout to big companies for them to keep getting richer. Can we go to the next slide? And my cultural products, one of them is a historical meme, and the other two are just memes. The historical meme, I decided to use a picture from when the Spanish flu happened, which is 100 years ago, about 100 years ago. And the reason I decided to use this picture is because it sort of shows that there's a precedent in the United States of dealing with pandemics, and people today are still more worried about the economy. They're prioritizing the economy over lives of people, right? They think that it's more important for the economy to open up instead of preserving lives. They think that a 1% death rate is not anything too serious when 1% of the American population is 3 million people. When you look at it in hard numbers, it's actually a lot of people. And more than that, that's just the people that die, because the people that survive still have things from COVID that affect them for the rest of their lives, meaning that the government has chosen to sacrifice people, right? Even in LA, the lockdown has happened, right? They were going into lockdown again, but malls are still functioning at 20% capacity. Open places, right? Businesses are still functioning. Many things that are not considered essential, right? They're not grocery stores, they're not restaurants, they're not food. Places like malls where people can just walk around and shop are still going to be open, despite the fact that every day the COVID cases are spiking up. And the people that suffer the most are the people that are working in these places, which are working class people, people of color, people from communities like Boyle Heights, East LA, South Central, who have to go out and work every day because rent is still coming up. They're evicting people. I mean, they started giving tickets again in downtown LA. They're giving traffic tickets, like they want to recover all the money they couldn't get before. So, I mean, in spite of everything that everybody has gone through, the financial support is just not there, and the government refuses to help anyone but big corporations.
That's time. I want to thank you so much. I was trying to like give you a little bit extra time to speak. I just want to give Karen the opportunity to go ahead and if you could share your screen, we'll go ahead and take a look at your cultural product. I know you're graduating this semester, so felicidades.
Let me get it up. Sorry.
So in the meantime, can we give some applause, some snaps, some applaud emojis for our last group that presented? Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I mean, we could essentially, well, I know Karen's trying to segue through, but you can see we could essentially spend like 20, 30 minutes per person, right? I mean, we could see that, right? It's just so fascinating, like all the research and the work that goes into these pieces is just beautiful. Okay, Karen.
Did it work? Can you guys see it? Oh, okay. So for my like in an imaginary world, I created this like an advertisement that would be shown when you drive around Los Angeles and in California. And I just wanted to highlight these three types of workers, which is construction, cooks, and those that work in the field. And I just wanted to give power to these people because most of the time these types of occupations are always looked down upon. And, you know, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have these three workers have shown to be especially the field workers, have shown how beneficial and how key they are to the way that California runs. And I feel like they never get praise. So I feel like I just want to create something, and I'm pretty sure you guys probably have members that work in these type of sectors. So I just wanted to give power to them and show them that and give them some praise, because the media, and I feel like Democrats or even Republicans never give them these type of workers praise. And that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Really quickly, because I know we're still recording this piece, right? And I'm gonna put y'all on the spot, right, as we're recording, and then I'm gonna end up shutting it off. But I'd like to ask you folks, right, who would like to comment, right, about what they see public history as. And you can talk about your project very briefly connected to it, or, you know, we've been talking about a lot of different themes, right, you know, throughout this semester. But how do you see public history really? Does anybody want to take that question?
I'll
Can I
go.
Okay,
Oh.
okay, we'll go Dan and then Javier.
Dan, go for it.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, it became a little bit more apparent whenever I was going over my cultural product thing. It's really just trying to get like really dense, sometimes like complicated or like murky information to like the public. Like not a lot of people have like the patience or the interest to go like this really boring like legalese that like for like the Prop 22 thing that like companies use to like push for stuff. And it's really important to have like, for me, who I can go on and on about really boring like labor stuff, to be able to kind of like translate and like simplify and like put out that information in like different forms of like media. Just because again, not everyone is able to like do that. Not everyone has the time, the patience, the skills to do that. So it's really important to just be able to kind of translate like history information to people.
Okay, and then Javier, really quick, and then we're gonna close.
I just want to say that public history is really fun, but it's really hard reaching out to an audience that you need to reach out to express your message or what your or just fighting for your cause. Sometimes I give it up to So Rebel Radio, the two Miss Aliat and Atu, the ones that have done their filming.
Louis and Allison, right? And Lopate's
Yeah.
brother, yes.
And also I brought them up in my paper, and just having a platform to spread your message, because when I was doing my little culture project, it was hard to get any feedback. So I just want to express that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now, but I want to thank, let's give everybody a round of applause formally. Snaps and all that good stuff for just doing amazing work this semester, right? I hope your journey in the public history world, right, helps you to see and connect more to, like, you know, information out to public and to our community spaces a lot more.